Hi guys, I'm Charlie Book Fanatic. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to talk to you about the books I managed to read in February. The first book I managed to read in February was in a totally new genre for me, and it's a genre called Lit RPG. I'm doing the Pop Sugar Challenge, and this one was in the advanced category for the Pop Sugar Challenge. I had to read a Lit RPG, and if you don't know what a Lit RPG is, it is basically what it suggests. A book written like an RPG with statistics and stuff. And the book I read for this category is The Land Founding, which is the first book in the Land series by Aleron. I feel like Aleron is like the founding father of this genre. When I googled Lit RPG, his was the website I found, and this is the first book in this major series in this genre. And I am not planning on continuing on with the series, although I did think it was fascinating to dive into this genre, but I didn't really particularly like it. I didn't think the writing was really good. I do need some good writing in my books. Although I did have fun with this book, I don't feel like I want to continue on with the series. It was not that enjoyable for me or that fascinating for me to want to continue on with it. I only rated it 3 stars and nothing really stood out for me. The parts I rated the lowest were the writing with only 2 stars and the characters with a 2.5. I felt like the characters weren't really developed. I didn't feel anything for our main character. I thought he was kind of annoying actually, and he was pretty naive. Like, it took him a long while to catch up with some stuff. I didn't even tell you what this book was about. It's about a character who plays role-playing games, and then suddenly he wakes up inside the role-playing game he has been playing for years, but the mechanics are suddenly totally different, which I felt like was really weird. You think the mechanics would be kind of the same as when he was playing the game, but they weren't, and it took him a very long time to catch up with everything, even though he had been playing this role-playing game for years. And the whole first book is basically setting up for the rest of the series as our main character figuring out the mechanics of this world and how he has to navigate inside of it. It was only 252 pages, and I felt like that was short enough for this book. I do feel like the author has split all of his books in shorter parts, although I think the first and second book could have been one big book, because I feel like the author kind of wants to make more money and just split his books up so he can make more money in tinier parts, so he can like churn out more books. And I don't really like that, to be honest. The author self-publishes his books, by the way. Yeah, that's not really my thing. I don't really feel like continuing with the series because I feel like every single book is just a tinier installment in this bigger world and it isn't like a full story on its own. Then I read a Patrick Ness book, and I love Patrick Ness. I have read quite a few of his books. I have read the entire Chaos Walking trilogy, which I really liked, and the last book was one of my favorite books of all time. And I also read The Rest of Us Just Live Here, which I also liked, and then I finally read More Than This. This book had been on my TBR years ago, but I never got around to it and eventually just lost interest in it. And then this past month I suddenly thought, why not read it? Why not give it a chance? It sounded interesting enough. I picked this up for the Pop Sugar Challenge of a book that could be turned into a movie, and I feel like this challenge was kind of hard because I obviously don't know that before I read the book, but based on the synopsis, I felt like this book could very well be a movie, and after reading it, I definitely still agree with that idea. This book follows a main character called Seth who drowns, and then when he wakes up, the whole world is abandoned. He wakes up in his old hometown where some tragic event happened to his family. He doesn't know what the hell is going on. He thought he was dead. He's not sure if he is dead or if he is still awake and what kind of weird stuff is going on, and this whole book is him trying to figure out what is actually going on with him. Why is he still alive, or is he not alive? This book was a 4-star read for me. I really liked it. There were some good plot twists in this book that I really enjoyed. Patrick Ness did not disappoint me with his writing. He always manages to capture my attention with his books, and this one was no different. I really like how he writes in all of these different genres. Like, this one was more of a post-apocalyptic book, and then The Rest of Us Just Live Here was very fantasy, and it was like a parody on the Chosen One trope, and then the Chaos Walking trilogy was like a science fiction fantasy series, and I really like all of that. Patrick Ness is definitely one of those authors I want to keep reading more from because he never really disappoints me. Then I read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is Naomi Novik's newest fantasy standalone. I loved her book Uprooted, and this book is very much in the same vein. It is a fantasy book, and Uprooted took a spin on Beauty and the Beast fairy tale, and Spinning Silver took Rumpelstiltskin and made it its own. What I didn't like about this book was that it had very unclear perspectives. There are no real chapter headings, you never know who is speaking, there is just a break and then a different character starts speaking. You have to figure out on your own who is talking at that moment, and there are quite a few perspectives in here, so it was really confusing at some points. I did manage to figure it out every time, but it might have taken me a little while. The first 100 pages were very slow for me. I felt like it got going very slow and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to continue on with this book and if I was enjoying it or not. Which also makes me feel this book was way too long for the story it was telling. Like the first 100 pages were way too slow. I felt like the event could have started much earlier, and this didn't need to be a 400-page book. It is a very loose retelling though. I wasn't entirely familiar with the Rumpelstiltskin story when I started reading it, but I read up on the fairy tale after I was finished, and I definitely recognized some elements in it, but I felt like this was a very, very loose retelling, and major elements of the Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale were not implemented in this book. Turning back to the perspective issue, there were a lot of perspectives in this, and in the synopsis, only 2 characters were mentioned, which were the characters of Miriam and Irina, but one major perspective that keeps coming back, Wanda, isn't even mentioned in the synopsis. I was so confused by that. Like, why is she not mentioned in the synopsis? She played a major role in this story. So I feel like the synopsis didn't really live up to the story. The story was entirely different from it, and I feel like it's kind of misleading. Although I did enjoy this book more than the synopsis led me to believe. I only picked this book up because I loved Uprooted and not really particularly because of the synopsis. So if the synopsis doesn't sound interesting to you, the book still might, because it's not really anything like the synopsis. Then a book that hasn't been on my TBR for very long, but I saw it in the bookstore, and I just suddenly felt like I wanted to read it. I wanted to read it ever since the movie came out, and everyone was suddenly raving about it, and that's Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This is the first book in the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy, I think, and I'm not going to continue on with the series. I did enjoy this first book, but it felt a little too in-depth for me. I feel like a lot of it was focused on the culture and not a lot on the story, and I like a lot of character development in my books, and maybe a little less world building, although I did get a good grip on Singaporean culture from this, and I really, really like that, but I felt like it could have been a bit less and more focused on the story bit. It was definitely deliciously extravagant, like some people have described it. Like, these people spend money like there's no tomorrow. There are a lot of different perspectives, and I like seeing the story from different perspectives. It's not just, like the synopsis says, it's not just about the main couple in this book, Nick and Rachel, who are trying to figure out their relationship amidst Nick's crazy richness and Rachel not knowing about it, but it's also about Nick's family. Like, a lot of Nick's family also get perspective in this book, and all of the different storylines going on, which I thought was very interesting. My favorite character in this book was Astrid, who is one of Nick's cousins. Perspective was seen a couple of times, and I really liked her storyline going on. I felt the most for her, definitely at the end of the book. I felt like I wasn't connecting to the characters up until the end of the book, and I suddenly felt very connected to Nick and Astrid especially. So the character development was definitely slow, but in the end it got there, although it didn't get there fast enough for me to want to pick up the second book. I definitely do still want to see the movie though. I am going to see it as soon as my boyfriend has read this book. Another book I definitely would have never expected me to pick up was The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend, which is the first book in the series of the same name, I think, or just the Morrigan Crow series. This is a middle grade book, and I do not like middle grade. I've never read a middle grade that I particularly enjoy, but this one really changed my mind. I actually enjoyed this one, and I didn't really pick it up because of the synopsis. The synopsis didn't sound all that interesting to me. It was mostly the people that were talking about it and people that were saying like, I normally don't like middle grade, but this book changed my mind. And I was like, okay, sure. Like, people were also comparing it to Harry Potter. I've only read the first book in the Harry Potter series, and I didn't particularly like it. That wasn't the trigger for me. It was really people that were saying like, this is the book that changed my mind on middle grade, and I really liked it. It didn't particularly change my mind on middle grade, but it definitely made me see that there could be books that I like in this age group. The cover does remind me of a particular edition of Harry Potter though. I can't tell you who illustrated it, but I think when you look at this cover and you know all of the Harry Potter editions that are out there, you know which covers I mean. It is also very shiny, very whimsical. This book was very emotional and very endearing, and I didn't expect that, to be honest. Middle grade always stays on surface level for me, but this one really didn't do that. It tackles some tough topics, like Morrigan is the cursed child in this book, and everyone just wants her to die at a certain point because she is the person that causes all of their doom and gloom, and that was such a heavy topic to deal with, especially because Morrigan was so depressed because no one talked to her, no one made eye contact with her, because as soon as they made eye contact with her, something terrible might have happened to them. This book definitely turned cozier when Jupiter went out of her town and into Nevermore with Jupiter North, who is her guide and the one who takes her on and takes her out of this whole world so she doesn't have to die. There was some great world building involved in this. I really, really like Nevermore, and I cannot wait to continue on with the series and see how this world grows and expands, and I just want to learn more about it because it is so magical. I did feel like it was a bit too fast paced, and I think it is because it is middle grade. Like, all the trials went by so fast. Like, there was one chapter and then the trial was done, and then there was a little break, and then there was another chapter to one trial. I do think that is because it was middle grade, because it is written for children really, and children really like their books to be fast paced. They need some action, but I felt like it could have been a bit slower and a bit more build up to those trials, and maybe the trials are a little bit longer, a bit more twists and turns maybe. But yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, especially since it is, I think, a factor. It can be chalked up to it being middle grade, and it's obviously not suddenly going to change genre. So yeah, this was a pleasant surprise, and I cannot wait to pick up the second book, which is already out. Yeah, I would sincerely recommend this. If you don't like middle grade, you might like this one. So these were all of the books I managed to read in February. Let me know down below if you read any of the books I read and what did you think about them, or what did you read in February? I would love to know. Thanks for watching. Goodbye!